I'm Beth. So I am the segment manager for private tutors here at Twinkl. I have tutored students. I mainly did primary, so obviously have encountered a bit of this transition period as well. But I think there are always so many questions about what's best to do and how can you best support those students as they transition to secondary school as well. So as Matt mentioned, we're joined by Jodie as well. And Jodie is from the Beyond team. So if you have any really specific questions, still feel free to ask those because Jodie is much better equipped to answer those than I am. So if you've got something specific, curriculum based, maybe Jodie might feel a bit on the spot, we might regret saying, but feel free to ask any questions you have. And hopefully by the end of the session today, you'll be feeling a bit clearer on things. So just a few housekeeping bits. I know we've mentioned already it's a little bit different to Zoom, but we do have some interactive bits in the session today. So across the bottom of your screen, you'll see this little toolbar that is here. And the first one I want to point out is the smiley face. So if you click on the smiley face, it'll provide you with loads of different emoji reactions you can give. If you don't want to talk, you don't want to use the chat box, you can just use those throughout. There might be bits where we ask you to respond with those. So it's a nice way that you can interact without having to speak or find all of the functions. We also have the mute button, similar to anything else. So if you could just mute yourself in case there's background noise. And then there is the camera button as well. So if you are wanting to turn your camera off, that's absolutely fine. Just pressing that button and it will go red, just like the mute button is there. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover some of the main differences between primary and secondary. So what your students might be experiencing as they transition to secondary. Jodie has reached out to some lovely secondary teachers and found out some of their pet peeves and things that they wish students knew as they were transitioning. Some specific parts of maths and English that will be a little bit different or will change for students as they go from year 6 to year 7. And throughout, there's going to be some resources that are shared in the chat as well. But as I said, if there's anything specific that you're looking for or anything you've wanted to find, Jodie's here and she knows the Beyond section like the back of her hand. So if there is something you've been hoping to find for ages and you've not been able to dig it out, make the most of the opportunity, send a message, and I'm sure Jodie will find those links for you. So as a little warm-up, we've got we're going to use our reactions. So going straight into some maths this morning. So sorry if your brain hasn't woken up quite yet. So just working out what is the value. So if you want to react with your emojis and see what we think the value is to this question. Got lots of ones coming through. You can see Jodie nodding. Jodie, do you want to give your reaction and give the final answer? There we go.
My actual answer is this is a terribly written question because obviously with BIDMAS or BODMAS or PEDMAS, whatever you want to call it, you do your brackets, then your division and your multiplication. But the reason this is terrible is if it was written as a fraction, the bottom of the fraction of the denominator is just treated like brackets. So that would be obvious, but it's not. And we had such an argument in the maths team about this. People are still not talking to each other. It was hilarious. So my honest answer is it's a stupid question.
There we go. But we all agree on number one as well. So it's those kinds of things that can be a complete shift for students, and they're so used to working questions out and how things work, but actually it's not always quite the same when moving to secondary. So as you said, there are some things that secondary school teachers find as a bit of a pet peeve when these students are making the transition from primary to secondary. Some of these, reading them, hearing them, you might be able to support your students with. Some of them are just parts of growing up and getting used to those new schools. But still with those, it's the things that you can bear in mind that actually the small things are sometimes the big things to students as well, and it can be so huge to them, even though it seems something so small and just a part of life. So we've got some misconceptions in geography, things that have been a little bit of a generalisation or at quite a simple level and actually has led to a misunderstanding. Chlorophyll's job is to turn the plant green. I am not a science specialist, so I'm now wondering what its actual job is. But we've then got some of the vocabulary. So some of the vocabulary just isn't there for things, especially in maths, not having that specific vocabulary to understand those questions. I believe this is for writing in English. There isn't a checklist for every answer, so you can't work through how to answer that question. It's not quite as descriptive of that when you're marking. Sometimes differences. So some students have done a lot of science in primary and some haven't done so much. So you've got different starting levels for the children. I think this one's really interesting. So in English, you've got all of these grammar terms that have been focused on, and then in secondary, you don't really need to know as much what it's called, but it's more how to use it. So the grammar isn't being marked in the same way as it is being done in year 6. Some continents and having all of these differences, all the little geography, terminology and technicalities. Here, someone getting upset because the ruler is a different colour to the one that the teacher was using. And I think this is one of those things that, like we said, can feel so small, but when you're in that whole new environment, everything's so different. And some children are so scared of doing the wrong thing or doing it in the wrong way. And actually these little things can mount up and become something really big to that child. And also wondering what to do next, that waiting for the next instruction. And actually secondary teaching can be quite different to primary, and actually there's not always someone to tell you what to do next. So what are these main changes that your students are going to experience as they come into secondary? So following on from that last pet peeve, students are expected to be much more independent. So there might not be as much hand-holding or as much guidance throughout of what they're doing. And I think sometimes having that confidence to ask questions if they're not certain, especially when it's new teachers, or they might be moving around different classrooms as well. So getting used to multiple different teachers in different situations, that can be quite difficult. So building that confidence and getting them used to different people. So then in English, you've got that shift from the details and being really specific to having a wider view on a whole concept or a topic and being a little bit broader in what you're looking at. In maths, you've got some of those new strands and new topics, and things are going to get a little bit more connected together as well. But one really big change is, unlike in Key Stage 2, there isn't a breakdown for each school year. So there isn't a breakdown of year 7, 8 and 9. Instead, it's just for the end of Key Stage 3. So it can be a little bit harder for students to know, or for parents to understand what their child needs to know by a certain point, because it's by the end of Key Stage 3. And there's a lot more specialist vocabulary as well, which can be really difficult to get your head around, especially if maths has always been your favourite subject because you love numbers, you're not as much of a fan of English, you don't like getting into the technicalities, but then actually you have to, because you then need this vocabulary for maths as well. It's not just numbers. I saw as well, Sharon, you've put in, oh, it's just disappeared, about from using pencil to pen. Yeah, and the pen licenses coming up. I think actually using those pens, and it's sometimes as well having the choice, isn't it? Being able to choose what you want to do, but the expectation that you will be using pen. It's the comfort is pencil when you're used to it, isn't it? You want to use what you're used to. So yeah, a great point there as well.
So in maths, the government have about a year ago just released a suggested scheme of work, which we are working through. So we've got the year 7 one up already, but there's no expectation for schools to cover it. So it's kind of this catch-22 that it does exist, but also your local school might not cover it. But it's a good starting point, if nothing else.
Perfect. So another interactive little bit. So we've got some quick fire vocabulary. So this covers some maths vocabulary, some English vocabulary as well. And these are things that your students might encounter as they go through secondary school. So we'll go through them. If you want to put your answer in the chat box, if you're feeling confident, go for it. If you don't want to and you just want to test yourself, that's absolutely fine. It can either be a public sharing of it or a private sharing of the definition. It's entirely up to you. So our first one is integer. I'll give you a minute and then I'll reveal the answer as well. Perfect. Yes, Sonia. So when we're talking about an integer, we're talking about a whole number. And as Mary's put in as well, including a negative, that could be a negative number or a positive number. It is any whole number. So you can give yourself a big tick or a big pat on the back, however you want to celebrate. Or if you didn't get it, that's absolutely fine. We don't mind. Our next one is inverse. Perfect. Yeah. So the opposite operation. So if we were, it's, you know, adding and subtracting or dividing and multiplying, they're the inverse. Perfect. Oh, the exact same example there, Mary. Thank you. Excellent. Now we've got negative. Okay, I saw Jodie then, and I know you had, when we were talking about this, you had a comment on negative. And as a secondary maths teacher, do you want to share?
So it's basically at secondary, we get very picky between the difference between negative, minus, and subtract, because people get confused between minus is used for both negative and subtract. So a lot of people would use negative for a number less than 0 and subtract for subtracting and try and not use minus, because it's just gets kids confused. So yes, they kind of are the same, but because that word minus is used for both, we try and avoid it.
Perfect. We've now got variable. And we've looked at this in a maths context. So sorry to anyone that wasn't expecting to turn up with maths this morning.
There's some English too.
It's on its way. Lovely, yes. So with a variable in algebra, it's the letter. So it could be X, A, B, whatever it is. That's your variable. Perfect. Oh, we're getting some really detailed answers coming through here. It's like having a full vocabulary list or dictionary. Perfect. And now we've got a coefficient. There we go. Yeah, so the number that comes in front of the variable. So in Mary's example, the 3 in 3x is our coefficient. Well done. We've moved on to English. So if you all didn't like the maths ones, don't worry. We've got etymology now. Hedging it with a question mark there, Sharon. Yeah, so the root of the word, the origin, where it's come from. Be confident. You knew that one. You could have been more confident with it. Perfect. Yeah, so where that word comes from. We've now got an auxiliary verb. COVID brain. We'll let you off with that one. Perfect. Yes, so we've got our auxiliary verb. It's used in tenses, moods, or voices of other verbs. Yeah, be, do, have are all examples of auxiliary verbs as well. Getting lots of question marks coming through. You know all the answers. Be confident with them. Perfect. We've then got an intransitive verb. Ooh, a new one. So an intransitive verb is a verb that doesn't require a direct object. So it doesn't need an object to be there. So like yawn, for example, is an intransitive verb. We've now got a synonym, which I think most people will recognize a synonym. Take it back to a nice one. Yeah, so words that have the same or very similar meaning to another word. We like that one. We like a synonym. Now we've got a homonym. Yes, perfect, Mary. So it sounds the same or has the same spelling as another word, but it means something different. So different to a synonym in that rather than having the same meaning, it has a different meaning. But if you saw them written, they'd look the same. There you go. Got that one from Twinkl. There you go. Always learning. Every day is a school day. Perfect. So these are all words that your students might be coming across in year 7. So start dropping them in your sessions or building that vocabulary. I think sometimes words feel more scary than they are. And they've experienced that with grammar and all the grammar terminology that they've been learning through primary, which sometimes feels terrifying. But actually, once you know what something is and it's just got a fancy name, it becomes a lot less daunting. But if anybody got full marks, feel free to brag about it. But I think you all did fantastic. So well done. And don't worry, that is the end of having to answer questions. No more maths, no more English. You can all relax again now. But thank you for taking part in it. So with English in year 7, what are the main things that your students might come across that are going to be a change from primary to secondary? So the main difference that they're going to encounter is rather than just having the knowledge, they need to apply that knowledge. So applying their knowledge and applying their skills to the questions and what they're working on. What we said earlier as well, so for writing, there's no checklist of what we're looking for. The writing tasks are a lot more open-ended, and there's not always one correct answer. It's much more about the opinions and interpretation that your student is having. So actually not just scanning through a text to find the answers, they're having to form their own opinions based on what they might be reading or what they're seeing in that text as well. And then in maths, as they shift over to maths, so the changes that we're going to see here, like we said, we've got that BidMaths. It's part of every question that they're going to be encountering. Although you will study topics independently, so you might be focusing on algebra, there is a lot more overlap between the topics that your students will be covering. And like we said with English, it's applying those methods. So applying what they know and working on those problem solving questions. And I think one thing that tutors do quite often anyway is there isn't just one right method. And if a student has found something really difficult, they don't understand the method they've been working on. I know often tutors will try a different method with them and see if they can get them to understand that answer. And actually, that's fine. It's about finding the answer. Do you have anything else you want to add on maths, Jodie?
Not particularly. I guess it's just kind of seeing things you expect in unusual formats. Kind of when you look at the GCSE papers, even though obviously you're not thinking about GCSE straight away, you kind of, so last year there was a question that was area of a triangle, but in a circle, and it just blew people's mind because it didn't look like it was supposed to look. And so just kind of trying to throw random things in there. That would be kind of the main thing. And use of a calculator is the other one. There's so little use of a calculator through Key Stage 2 that most kids come absolutely clueless as to how to use them.
I think especially when you get to a scientific calculator as well, I remember it taking me nearly as long to figure out how to actually turn it on when I first got one, because I didn't know where to start with it. So yeah.
And I mean, I've had the same calculator since I was 12 and I'm still learning new things, and it's been 18 years.
I mean, that sounds like a calculator to recommend if it's still going.
Most schools recommend the Casio, so I can put the full code in the chat. But if you ever do get questions for GCSE, it's about £8. It's normally cheaper through a school. There's a better calculator that they need at A level, but it's not a problem in year 7. But I'll pop the code for what most schools recommend and what's recommended for GCSE in the chat.
Perfect, thank you. So as we said, Jodie has joined us from the Beyond team today, and Beyond is the home of everything beyond primary. So you will find everything you need. As Matt mentioned at the start, it does also include A-level as well. So it's got the Key Stage 3 resources. They have transition resources as well. And I know Jodie's just been talking about the using a calculator. I recently found a great resource that they've created all about using a calculator. So that was fantastic to actually see that. So there's loads of support, there's loads of advice, and if there are things you're unsure of as well, I think it's a great place to go and just brush up your own knowledge, downloading some of those worksheets, especially in maths. The walkthrough worksheets are absolutely fantastic for giving an example as well. And even if it's something you've done before but you've not done it for a while, it's a really nice way to have that refresher before you go into that session with a child. And then they also have a podcast. So Jodie, do you want to talk about the podcast as the host?
Yeah, so this is a podcast that I host with Marie, who's an English teacher. We come out every 2 weeks and we talk about different topics. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a chat with an Ofsted inspector, which was genuinely the most interesting chat I've ever had. We've got one on outdoor education that came out last week, and then we're planning to do one on transition in kind of the next few weeks. So it is just kind of, call it a little slice of staff room chat. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit sarcastic, because that's what secondary school teachers do. But I'd highly recommend, because I think it's brilliant. But then maybe that's because I'm biased. Yeah.
Lovely, perfect. Well, has anybody got any questions at all, whether it's linked to something we've discussed during the session, or whether it's something extra that has come up, or even if it's just Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, GCSE or A-level, if you've got questions related. I think Jodie can help a little with those as well.
So all of our Beyond resources are kind of targeted towards teachers, and then Beyond Revision is specifically targeted towards kids. But particularly with maths, it does go right down to kind of the basics. So we have a Beyond Revision resource on multiplication, which just covers multiplication, because obviously there's some kids that do need to revise that. And it's much more simply explained than the teacher ones, because it's designed to be done more independently. So they're quite good if you've got kids still struggling with those basics.